Evelyn Jackson crumples onto the Los Angeles train platform, her frail frame motionless as gasps ripple through the crowd. A viral video replays her final moments, denied a diabetic meal by a smug conductor hours earlier, sparking chaos that ended here. Everyone assumes she's gone, a victim of neglect, but her eyes flicker open unseen. What began as a simple trip exploded into a battle exposing a rotten system, and this collapse isn't her end. It's a spark. What's she planning next? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice. Against all odds, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales of courage. Evelyn Jackson settled into her seat on the Atlanta to Los Angeles train, her gnarled hands clutching a worn leather purse as the hum of the engine vibrated through the steel floor. At 72, she carried the weight of a life hard-earned, her skin etched with lines from decades as a nurse in underfunded clinics, stitching wounds and soothing fevers while dodging slurs from patients who'd rather bleed than accept her touch. Today, though, was different. She was headed west to see her grandson Marcus walk across a college stage, a diploma in hand, the first in their family to claim that prize. Her chest swelled at the thought, a rare flicker of joy piercing the exhaustion that clung to her bones. She'd pre-ordered a diabetic meal weeks ago, a necessity for her condition, her blood sugar a fickle beast that demanded precision. The dining car smelled of warm bread and coffee as she eased into a cushioned booth, her cane propped against the table, its rubber tip scuffed from years of steadying her stride. The train rolled out of Atlanta, cutting through humid air thick, with the scent of pine and diesel, the city's skyline shrinking behind her. Passengers chattered, their voices a low buzz, some in crisp suits tapping laptops, others in faded jeans cradling kids with sticky fingers. Evelyn adjusted her glasses, peering out the window at the blur of green fields, her mind drifting to Marcus's grin when she'd last seen him, all braces and dreams. She'd packed light, just a small suitcase and her meds, the little orange bottle rattling in her purse. The dining car door swung open, and a wiry man strode in, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming. Trent Baxter, conductor. He moved with a swagger, his pinched face tight with a smirk that didn't reach his pale blue eyes. Evelyn caught his glance, a quick flick of dismissal, and her stomach tightened. A reflex honed from years of reading rooms where she wasn't welcome. Trent stopped at her booth, his clipboard tapping against his thigh, his posture all sharp angles. "Meal order?" he asked, voice clipped, like he was already halfway out the conversation. Evelyn straightened, her tone calm but firm. "Yes, I pre-ordered a diabetic meal. Confirmation's in my email." She pulled out her phone, fingers steady despite the faint tremor in her wrists, and scrolled to the receipt, the black text stark against the screen. Diabetic meal, passenger Evelyn Jackson, seat 14B, order Shopify FESM 892. Trent barely glanced at it, his lips curling into something sour. "Yeah, well, that didn't make it. Mix up at the depot. Here's what we've got." He tossed a plastic-wrapped sandwich onto the table, its bread pale and limp, a smear of mustard leaking through the cellophane. Evelyn's brow furrowed, her voice steady but edged. "That's not an option. I've got diabetes. I need what I ordered, not some random sandwich." Trent's smirk widened, his stance shifting to block the aisle, his shadow falling over her. "Look, lady, we're not a hospital. You get what's available. Take it or leave it." Evelyn's pulse quickened, her hands trembling now not from age but from the heat rising in her chest. She'd faced this before, the casual shrug off, the assumption she'd just nod and take it. Not today. "I followed your rules," she said, tapping the phone screen. "This says you're supposed to have it. I can't eat that. My sugar'll drop and I'll be sick." Trent leaned in, his breath sour with stale coffee, his voice dropping low. "Rules are rules, and I say we're out. You're not special. Deal with it." He turned on his heel, his boots thudding against the floor, leaving her words hanging in the air like smoke. The dining car went quiet, forks pausing mid-bite, eyes darting her way. A white woman 2 tables over snickered, whispering to her husband, her voice carrying just enough to sting. "Always something with them, huh?" Her husband chuckled, his tie loose, his gaze sliding past Evelyn like she was furniture. A teenage girl across the aisle stared, her earbuds dangling, but said nothing, her fingers hovering over her phone. Evelyn's chest tightened, her breath shallow as she unwrapped the sandwich, its contents a sad smear of processed meat and wilted lettuce. She pushed it aside, her hands shaking harder now, the first sign of her sugar dipping. She rummaged in her purse for a glucose tablet, popping one into her mouth, the chalky sweetness dissolving on her tongue. It'd hold her for a bit, but not long. She glanced around, catching the eyes that lingered, then flicked away, the silence louder than the clatter of the tracks beneath them. Minutes ticked by, the train slicing through Georgia farmland, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows across the car. Evelyn's mind churned, her anger simmering beneath a lifetime of restraint. She'd stitched up gunshot wounds in ERs, while doctors barked orders over her head, raised Marcus alone after his mom OD'd, fought landlords who'd rather evict than fix a leaking roof. This wasn't new, this dismissal, this assumption she'd shrink, but it burned hotter now, fueled by the promise of Marcus's graduation, the one thing she'd clung to through the grind. She tapped her cane against the floor, the rhythm steadying, her resolve hardening. Trent strutted back through, his clipboard tucked under his arm, his eyes skimming the car like a king surveying peasants. He paused at a table near the front, a white man in a polo shirt waving him over. "Hey, my gluten-free order's perfect, thanks," the guy said, grinning as Trent handed him a steaming tray, the scent of grilled chicken wafting over. Evelyn's jaw clenched, her fingers curling into fists. She watched as Trent nodded, all charm and nods for that guy, then flicked his gaze her way, his smirk returning sharper now like he knew she'd seen it. The lie was bare, blatant, a slap across her face. They had special meals, just not for her. Her blood sugar teetered, a faint dizziness creeping in, but she swallowed it down, her eyes locked on Trent's back as he sauntered off. The car buzzed again, conversations picking up, but the air felt thicker, heavier with the weight of what had just happened. Evelyn's hands shook harder, the glucose tablet barely holding her steady, her purse spilling open as she fumbled for another. A woman nearby, her hair pulled tight in a bun, muttered to her friend, "Should have brought her own food if it's that serious." The friend nodded, her lips pursed, her eyes sliding past Evelyn like she was a ghost. Evelyn's breath hitched, her vision blurring at the edges, but she forced herself to focus, her mind racing. She'd dealt with worse, survived nights in ERs with no backup, faced down cops who'd rather cuff her than listen. This was a conductor, a petty tyrant in a polyester vest, but he'd picked the wrong fight. She pulled out her phone again, her fingers trembling as she typed a note, the words sharp and deliberate. Trent Baxter, conductor, denied diabetic meal, 3/28/25. She saved it, her lips pressing into a thin line. She'd need proof, something, to hold on to when this escalated, because she knew it would. The train rattled on, the fields giving way to scrubby hills, the sun sinking into a smear of orange and pink. Evelyn leaned back, her cane tapping faster now, her heart pounding not just from sugar but from a fire she hadn't felt in years. She glanced at the sandwich again, its plastic crinkling under her fingers as she shoved it to the edge of the table. Her stomach growled, a low ache spreading through her. But she ignored it, her eyes narrowing as Trent's laughter echoed from the galley. He thought he'd won, thought she'd crumble like so many had before her. He didn't know her, didn't know the steel she'd forged through decades of being told no, of being pushed aside. She'd raised Marcus on scraps and grit, kept him off streets that swallowed kids whole, and she'd be damned if some smug conductor would take this trip from her. The dizziness hit harder, her head swimming, but she gripped the table, her knuckles whitening. She'd fight this, not just for her meal, not just for her health, but for every time she'd been forced to swallow this kind of garbage and smile. The car rocked gently, the rhythm of the tracks a steady pulse beneath her, but Evelyn's world tilted, her body screaming for what it needed. She popped another glucose tablet, her tongue dry, her throat tight. It'd buy her time, maybe an hour, but she couldn't keep this up. She needed that meal, needed to get to LA in one piece, needed to see Marcus's face light up when she walked into that auditorium. Trent's voice drifted back, joking with a crew member, carefree, oblivious to the storm he'd kicked up. Evelyn's eyes burned, her anger a live wire sparking in her chest. She'd make him see, make him regret this. The train barreled west, the miles ticking by, and Evelyn sat there frail but unyielding, her cane a quiet promise of what was coming. Evelyn Jackson's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the dining car table, the train rumbling through the dusk-lit plains of Alabama, its wheels clacking a steady beat beneath her. The glucose tablet's chalky residue lingered on her tongue, a frail lifeline against the dizziness gnawing at her edges, but it wasn't enough. Her blood sugar wobbled, a tightrope walk she'd mastered over decades, yet now it fueled a fire hotter than her fatigue. Trent Baxter's smug dismissal still echoed in her ears, his lie laid bare by that gluten-free tray he'd handed out, like a king tossing crumbs. She'd seen the snickers, felt the stares, the way the car had split between those who judged and those too cowardly to care. Enough was enough. She pushed herself up, her cane thudding against the floor, her voice cutting through the hum of chatter like a blade through silk. "Excuse me, Mr. Baxter," she called, loud enough to turn heads, her tone steady despite the quiver in her limbs. "I need my meal, or I need a supervisor. Now." Trent froze mid-stride near the galley, his wiry frame tensing, his pinched face twisting into a scowl as he spun to face her. The dining car hushed, forks clinking to a stop, eyes darting between them like spectators at a prize fight. He marched back, his boots stomping a rhythm of contempt, stopping inches from her booth, his shadow looming over her frail form. "What's your problem, lady?" he snapped, his voice dripping venom, his pale eyes narrowing. "I told you, we're out. You don't get to make a scene just 'cause you think you're special." Evelyn's chest heaved, her breath shallow, but she held his gaze, her years as a nurse steadying her nerves. "I'm not special," she said, her words sharp, deliberate. "I'm diabetic. I ordered ahead. You gave that man his meal. Where's mine?" She pointed to the polo shirt guy, now shrinking in his seat, his tray half-eaten, his face flushed. Trent's smirk faltered, then hardened into something uglier. "You calling me a liar?" he hissed, leaning closer, his breath hot with stale coffee and spite. "Maybe you're faking it, huh? Playing the victim card. I've seen your type. Before, always whining for handouts." The words landed like a punch, raw and racial, stripping the air from the car. Evelyn's heart pounded, her vision swimming, but she stood taller, her cane a pillar of defiance. "My type?" she shot back, her voice rising unshaken. "I worked 40 years saving lives while folks like you spat in my face. I'm not faking anything. You're just too lazy to do your job." A gasp rippled through the car, the teenage girl across the aisle yanking out her earbuds, her eyes wide. A young black man near the window, Jamal, slid his phone from his pocket, his thumb hovering over the record button, his lips mouthing, "I've got your back." Trent's face flushed crimson, his fists clenching at his sides, his control slipping. "You're trouble," he snarled, his voice low, menacing. "Keep this up, and you're off at the next stop. I don't care who you are." Evelyn's knees wobbled, her sugar crashing harder, but she refused to sit, her eyes blazing. "Try it," she said, her tone ice cold. "I'll sue this company into the ground. You think I don't know my rights?" Trent lunged forward, his hand snatching Jamal's phone as the kid hit record, the screen flashing red. "No filming on my train," he barked, slamming the device onto the table, his fingers swiping to delete the clip before tossing it back. Jamal lunged for it, but Trent shoved him down, his palm hard against the kid's chest. "Sit, or you're next," he growled, then turned to Evelyn, his sneer vicious. You're done." He reached for her cane, his grip rough, yanking it from her grasp and tossing it aside with a clatter that echoed through the car. Evelyn stumbled, her hands flailing, clutching the table's edge as her legs buckled beneath her. Pain shot through, her hip, her breath catching, but she didn't fall, not yet. The car erupted in murmurs, a white man in a suit muttering, "She's asking for it," while the woman with the tight bun hissed, "Disrespectful old hag." Others stared, frozen, their forks hovering, their cowardice a thick fog. Jamal scrambled to his feet, his fists balled, his voice trembling with rage. "You can't touch her like that." Trent wheeled on him, his finger jabbing the air. "Shut it, kid, or you're both out." Evelyn's head spun, her vision blurring, but she forced herself upright, her hands clawing the table for balance. "You'll regret this," she rasped, her words a vow, her strength fading but her will unbroken. Trent laughed, a harsh barking sound that grated against the car's steel walls, his confidence unshaken. "Regret? Lady, you're the one who's gonna wish you'd stayed quiet." He turned, strutting back to the galley, his boots thudding. A victory march, leaving Evelyn swaying, her cane 10 feet away, its handle glinting under a seat. Jamal darted forward, snagging it, pressing it into her hands with a whispered, "We're not done." Evelyn gripped it, her knuckles whitening, her breath ragged as she sank back into the booth, her body screaming for sugar, her mind racing. The car buzzed again, voices overlapping, some hostile, some hushed, but no one stepped up. No one bridged the gap between watching and acting. Her hands trembled harder, her purse spilling glucose tablets across the table, one rolling under the seat like a lost hope. She popped another tablet, her mouth dry, her tongue sticking to the roof, the sweetness a faint shield against the crash creeping closer. Her eyes locked on Jamal, his phone clutched tight, his jaw set. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, urgent. She nodded, barely, her lips pressing into a grim line. "For now," she muttered, her gaze flicking to the galley where Trent's laughter drifted out, carefree, taunting. She'd faced down worse, stitched up gangbangers while they cursed her name, walked picket lines for better wages while rocks flew past her head. This was a conductor, a small man with a big ego, but he'd lit a fuse she couldn't douse. Her sugar teetered, her head pounding, but she leaned toward Jamal, her whisper fierce. "You still got that video?" He grinned, sly and sharp, tapping his pocket. Backed it up before he grabbed it. Clouds got it safe. Evelyn's chest loosened, a spark of hope cutting through the haze, her mind sharpening despite the fog. "Good," she said, her voice a thread of steel. "He thinks he's won. He's wrong." The train rocked, slicing through the night. The windows black now, reflecting the car's dim lights and tense faces. Her hip throbbed where she'd hit the table, her legs weak, but she sat taller, her cane a scepter in her grip. Trent had pushed her, humiliated her, counted on her to break. He didn't know her, didn't know the woman who'd raised a boy into a man on nothing but grit and prayers, who'd stared down death in ERs and walked away, standing. She'd make him pay, not just for the meal, not just for the shove, but for every sneer, every assumption that she'd fold. The car settled, the murmurs fading, but the air crackled with unspoken stakes. Evelyn's breath steadied, her hands still shaking, but her resolve ironclad. She'd get her meal, get to Marcus, get justice, or burn this train's reputation to ash trying. Jamal slid into the seat across from her, his eyes bright with defiance. "What's next?" he asked, his voice a lifeline. She smiled, faint, but fierce, her mind already spinning plans. "We wait," she said, her words a promise. "He'll trip, and we'll be ready." The train barreled on, the night swallowing the fields, and Evelyn sat there, frail but unbowed, her fight just beginning. Hey folks, what do you think? Should Evelyn have backed down, or was standing up worth the risk? Drop a comment with number 1 if you're Team Evelyn, fighting no matter the odds, and hit that like button if you're rooting for her to take Trent down. Subscribe to catch every twist as this battle heats up. Could a supervisor really turn this around, or is the system too rotten to care? Stick around to find out. The train screeched to a halt at a dusty station in Mississippi, its brakes groaning as the night pressed against the windows, thick and black, the air outside heavy with the scent of wet earth and magnolias. Evelyn Jackson sat rigid in her booth, her cane clutched tight, her breath shallow as the glucose tablets barely held her sugar from plummeting. Her hip ached from Trent's shove, a dull throb pulsing through her, but her eyes burned with a fire that outshone her frailty. Jamal hovered nearby, his phone tucked in his pocket, the backed-up video a silent weapon waiting to strike. The dining car buzzed with restless passengers, their whispers sharp and jagged after the confrontation, some casting wary glances her way, others muttering about troublemakers under their breath. Evelyn ignored them, her focus razor-edged, her mind locked on the next move. She'd stood up, taken the hit, and now she'd see it through. The car door slid open with a hiss, and a woman stepped in, her heels clicking against the steel floor, her uniform crisp, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Clara Holt, supervisor. She was tall, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face a mask of practiced calm, but her eyes darted nervously as she scanned the room. Jamal had slipped out during the stop, his quick call to the rail company's hotline, a lifeline Evelyn hadn't expected him to pull so fast. Now Clara approached, her clipboard clutched like a shield, her voice smooth but strained. "Ms. Jackson?" she asked, stopping at the booth, her gaze flicking to the cane, the spilled glucose tablets, the untouched sandwich. Evelyn nodded, her lips tight, her hands trembling but steady enough to meet Clara's eyes. "That's me," she said, her tone flat, unyielding. "I'm guessing you've heard about your conductor." Clara's smile was thin, apologetic, a crack in her professional veneer. "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry about this. There's been a misunderstanding. I've got your meal right here." She gestured to a crew member trailing behind, a young woman with a nervous twitch who set a steaming tray on the table. Grilled chicken, steamed greens, a small roll, all labeled diabetic friendly. Order 57892. Evelyn's stomach growled, a raw ache twisting through her, but she didn't touch it yet, her suspicion a tight knot in her chest. "A misunderstanding?" she echoed, her voice low, sharp. "He denied me, shoved me, called me a liar. That's not a mix-up. That's a choice." Clara's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on the clipboard, her eyes darting to the passengers watching, their phones poised like vultures circling a kill. "I've spoken to Trent," Clara said, her tone softening, placating. "He's been under a lot of stress lately, working double shifts. He didn't mean any harm. I'll make sure he's reprimanded, and this won't happen again." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper, her breath warm against Evelyn's ear. "He's not racist, Ms. Jackson. Just overworked. Let's put this behind us, okay?" Evelyn's jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Not racist? She'd heard that excuse 100 times, a flimsy bandage slapped over wounds that never healed. She'd patched up kids in ERs while parents sneered, fought for Marcus's school supplies while teachers shrugged, and now this woman thought a meal and a whisper could erase Trent's venom. But her sugar was crashing, her head spinning, and she needed to eat. She nodded once, curt, her eyes never leaving Clara's. "Fine," she said, her voice a thread of steel. "But I'm watching." Clara's relief was palpable, her shoulders relaxing as she stepped back, her smile widening, forced but bright. "Thank you, ma'am. Enjoy your meal. We'll handle everything." She turned, her heels clicking away, the crew member scurrying, after her like a shadow. Evelyn pulled the tray closer, her hands shaking as she tore into the chicken, the warm meat a lifeline flooding her system, her sugar inching back from the brink. Jamal slid into the seat across from her, his eyes bright, with cautious hope. "You think she's legit?" he asked, his voice low, his fingers tapping the table. Evelyn chewed slowly, her gaze flicking to the galley where Trent had vanished, her mind churning. "She's covering," she muttered, swallowing hard, the roll crumbling in her fingers. "But I've got food now. That's a win." Jamal grinned sly and sharp, his phone glinting in his hand. "Video's still safe. We've got leverage." The train jolted back to life, pulling away from the station, its wheels grinding against the tracks, the night swallowing the platform's flickering lights. Evelyn ate steadily, her strength seeping back, her dizziness fading, her pulse steadying. The car settled, passengers returning to their meals, their chatter a low hum, the tension easing like a storm passing. She felt a flicker of triumph, a rare warmth spreading through her chest. She'd stood up, pushed back, and won something, however small. Trent was on notice, Clara was on her side, and she'd lived to see Marcus's graduation. She leaned back, her cane resting against her knee, her breath easier, her body lighter. Maybe this was justice, or at least a step toward it. She glanced at Jamal, his grin infectious, his youth a mirror to Marcus's, and she allowed herself a faint smile, her first since Atlanta. But the peace shattered as the galley door creaked open, Trent's wiry frame slinking out, his eyes locked on her. From across the car, his smirk gone, replaced by something darker, colder. He didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood there, his gaze a blade slicing through her fragile victory. Evelyn's stomach twisted, her fork pausing mid-air, her instincts screaming. He wasn't done. She watched as he slipped into the crew quarters, his hand clutching a radio, his voice a faint murmur crackling through the static. She strained to hear, her ears catching fragments. Troublemaker, incident report, handle it. Her heart sank, her triumph curdling into dread, her fingers tightening around her cane. Clara's whispers, Trent's glare, the radio. It wasn't over. They were plotting, weaving something worse, and she'd walked right into it. The train barreled west, the night deepening, the car's lights flickering faintly, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Evelyn set her fork down, her meal half finished, her appetite gone, her mind racing. She'd thought she'd won, thought Clara's meal and Trent's retreat meant she'd turned the tide. But Clara's excuse rang hollow now, a flimsy shield for a man who'd rather break her than bend. She glanced at Jamal, his grin fading, his eyes following hers to the crew quarters. "He's up to something," she said, her voice a whisper, her hands trembling again, not from sugar, but from fear. "He's lying about me, setting me up." Jamal's jaw tightened, his fingers curling around his phone. "Let him try," he said, his tone fierce, protective. "We've got proof." Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening, her cane tapping. A slow rhythm against the floor, a metronome to her racing thoughts. She'd survived the shove, the hunger, the stares, and she'd survived this. She'd stitched up chaos in ERs, raised Marcus through nights of gunfire and grief, and she wouldn't let Trent steal this trip, this moment from her. The car rocked gently, the tracks a steady pulse beneath her, but her world tilted again, her victory a mirage dissolving into a storm she couldn't yet see. Trent's radio crackled louder, his voice a hiss through the static, and Evelyn caught the tail end. Disruptive. Next stop. Deal with her. Her breath caught, her eyes narrowing, her mind spinning plans. She'd won the meal, sure, but the fight was just warming up, and Trent was playing a game she hadn't yet figured out. The train sliced through the darkness, the miles ticking by, the passengers oblivious to the war brewing in the shadows. Evelyn sat there, her tray pushed aside, her cane a quiet promise, her strength fraying but unbowed. She'd thought she'd beaten him, thought she'd claimed a piece of justice, but it was a lie, a trap dressed up as a win. Trent wasn't stressed, wasn't sorry. He was furious, and he'd make her pay. Her sugar stabilized, her body steadied, but her heart pounded with a new fear, a new fire. She'd get to LA, see Marcus graduate, or she'd drag this whole rotten system down with her. The crew quarters door clicked shut, Trent's shadow gone, and Evelyn leaned toward Jamal, her whisper fierce. "Keep that video ready," she said, her eyes blazing. "He's coming for us." The train rumbled through the Mississippi night, its wheels grinding against the tracks, the air inside the dining car thick with the lingering scent of grilled chicken and stale coffee. Evelyn Jackson sat hunched in her booth, her cane propped against the table, its rubber tip worn thin from years of steadying her fragile frame. The meal Clara had brought sat half-eaten, a cold lump in her stomach, her sugar stabilized, but her nerves frayed. Trent's radio chatter echoed in her mind, a venomous hiss promising trouble, his shadow lurking beyond the crew quarters door. She'd thought she'd won, thought the supervisor's intervention had clipped his wings, but his glare, his muttered threats, told a different story. Jamal sat across from her, his young face taut with defiance, his phone a lifeline clutched. In his hand, the video safe in the cloud, a ticking bomb they hadn't yet detonated. The car hummed with restless passengers, their chatter a low drone, oblivious to the storm brewing in the shadows. The train jolted, a sharp lurch that rattled plates and sent a glass tumbling, shattering on the floor with a crack that snapped heads around. Evelyn's hands trembled, her pulse quickening, her instincts screaming as Trent emerged from the galley, his wiry frame stiff with purpose, his pinched face a mask of calculated calm. He carried a small black bag, his fingers tapping it rhythmically, his eyes scanning the car until they locked on her. "Random security check," he announced, his voice loud, authoritative, cutting through the murmur like a whip. Passengers shifted, some groaning, others complying with practiced boredom, unzipping bags and flashing IDs. Trent moved down the aisle, his boots thudding, his smirk twitching as he stopped at Evelyn's booth, his shadow swallowing the light. "You," he said, his tone clipped, accusing. "Open your purse. Now." Evelyn's chest tightened, her breath shallow. But she met his gaze, her years as a nurse steeling her against his venom. "Why me?" she asked, her voice steady, her hands resting on her purse, its leather cracked from decades of use. Trent's smirk widened, his eyes glinting, with malice. "Policy," he snapped, his fingers tightening on the bag. "You've been disruptive. I've got reason to suspect." Evelyn's mind raced, her suspicion a live wire sparking in her gut. Disruptive. She'd eaten her meal, stayed quiet, let Clara smooth it over. This was a play, a setup, and she could smell it. She slid her purse toward him, her fingers lingering on the clasp, her eyes never leaving his. "Go ahead," she said, her tone ice cold. "But I'm watching every move." Trent unzipped it with a flourish, his hands diving in, rummaging through her meds, her wallet, her crumpled tissues, his movements deliberate, theatrical. Passengers craned their necks, their whispers sharpening into a chorus of judgment. The white woman with the tight bun muttering, knew she was trouble. Then Trent paused, his hand emerging with a sleek leather wallet, its stitching pristine, its weight heavy with cash and cards. He held it up, his smirk blooming into a grin, his voice booming. "Well, look at this. Not yours, is it?" Evelyn's heart stopped, her breath catching, her vision narrowing as the car erupted in gasps. "That's not mine," she said, her words firm, her hands clenching the table. "You planted it." Trent laughed, a harsh grating sound that bounced off the steel walls, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Planted? Nice try, lady. This belongs to Mr. Grayson, seat 8C. Reported it missing an hour ago." He waved the wallet toward a balding man in a suit who nodded nervously, his eyes darting away. Evelyn's stomach twisted, her sugar teetering despite the meal, her dizziness creeping back. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice rising, her cane tapping the floor in a furious rhythm. "You're framing me." Trent leaned in, his breath hot against her face, his whisper a snarl. "Prove it, old woman. No one's buying." "Your sob story now." The car turned hostile, voices overlapping, slurs slipping out like venom. "Thief. Typical. Should have known." Jamal shot to his feet, his fists balled, his voice trembling with rage. "You're lying. She didn't do this." Trent wheeled on him, his hand slamming Jamal's shoulder, shoving him back into the seat. "Sit down, kid, or you're an accomplice," he barked, his authority a club swinging wild. Evelyn's head spun, her hands shaking harder, but she stood, her cane a crutch, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're a coward," she said, her words a blade, her eyes blazing. "You think this'll stick? I've got nothing to hide." Trent's grin faltered, then hardened, his hand dipping into his pocket, pulling out a pair of zip ties. "We'll see," he said, his tone icy, final. "Security's taking you both at the next stop." The train slowed, its brakes screeching. As it pulled into a dimly lit station, the platform a blur of shadows and flickering bulbs. Two burly security guards boarded, their vests tight, their faces blank, their hands on their belts as Trent waved them over. "She stole it," he said, tossing the wallet to one, his smirk unshaken. "And he's causing a disturbance. Lock him up." Evelyn's legs buckled, her sugar crashing again, her vision blurring, but she held her ground, her cane a lifeline. "Check my purse," she rasped, her voice fading. No prints, no proof. The guards ignored her, one grabbing her arm, the other cuffing Jamal, his protests muffled as they dragged him toward the holding car, a cramped steel box at the train's rear. Evelyn stumbled, her purse spilling across the floor, her meds rolling under seats, her breath ragged as the guard yanked her forward. Passengers jeered, their phones flashing, capturing her humiliation, her frailty, her defeat. The white man, in the suit, muttered, "Justice served," his tie askew, his grin smug. The teenage girl stared, her earbuds dangling, her silence a betrayal. Evelyn's world tilted, her body screaming for insulin, her mind clawing for a way out. They shoved her into the holding car, a windowless cage stinking of sweat and rust, Jamal beside her, his wrists raw from the cuffs, his eyes wide with fear. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking, the train jolting back to life, pulling away from the station into the endless night. Inside, Evelyn slumped against the wall, her cane clattering to the floor, her hands trembling as she fumbled for a glucose tablet, the last one in her pocket. She popped it in, her tongue dry, her throat tight, the sweetness a faint shield against the crash. Jamal kicked the door, his voice hoarse. "They can't do this, we've got the video." Evelyn nodded, her breath shallow, her mind sharpening despite the haze. "They don't know that," she said, her words a whisper, her resolve ironclad. "He thinks he's got us. He's wrong." She'd stayed calm, kept her head, thought she'd outsmarted him by not fighting harder, by letting the guards take her. She'd prove her innocence, clear her name, get back to Marcus. But Trent's shadow loomed, his smirk a ghost in her mind, and she knew he wasn't done. The holding car rocked, its steel walls cold against her back, the air stale, suffocating. She heard footsteps outside, Trent's voice crackling through a radio, his tone smug, triumphant. "Got a report ready," he said, his words faint but clear. "Theft, assault, resisting. She's finished." Evelyn's heart sank, her hands clenching, her sugar teetering on the edge. Assault, resisting. He was piling lies on lies, building a cage she couldn't break. She glanced at Jamal, his face pale, his fists bruised, and saw Marcus in him, the boy she'd raised through storms worse than this. She'd survived gunshots in ERs, evictions in the dead of winter, nights praying over a son who'd nearly slipped away. This was a conductor, a petty tyrant with a badge, but he'd turned her into a criminal, a scapegoat for a car full of strangers who'd rather hate than help. The train barreled west, the miles ticking by, the holding car a prison swallowing her hope. Evelyn's head pounded, her vision swimming, but she forced herself to sit up, her cane a quiet promise in her grip. She'd beaten the hunger, faced the shove, won the meal, and she'd beat this too. Trent thought he'd trapped her, thought her age, her race, her frailty made her easy prey. He didn't know her, didn't know the woman who'd stitched up chaos while the world burned around her, who'd walked through fire to see Marcus rise. She'd get out, get to LA, or drag this whole rotten train down with her. The radio crackled again, Trent's voice a hiss through the static, and Evelyn caught the end. "Police'll handle her. She's done." Her breath caught, her eyes narrowing, her mind spinning. He'd slipped a fake report into the mix, branded her a felon, and she was running out of time. The holding car jolted with every clack of the train's wheels, its steel walls pressing in on Evelyn Jackson like a coffin, the air stale and heavy with the stench of rust and despair. Her frail frame slumped against the cold metal, her cane gripped tight, its tip scraping the floor as her hands trembled from the sugar crash clawing at her edges. Jamal paced the cramped space, his wrists raw from the zip ties, his breath ragged, his eyes darting to the locked door, a beast caged but unbowed. The train barreled through the Louisiana night, its horn a distant wail cutting through the darkness, the miles piling up between them and freedom. Trent's fake report crackled in her mind, a noose tightening around her neck, his lies painting her as a thief, an assailant, a nothing. She'd survived the meal denial, the shove, the frame-up, but this was a new beast, a legal trap she couldn't outrun without a miracle. A faint shuffle sounded outside, a shadow flickering past the door's narrow slit, and Evelyn's head snapped up, her instincts flaring. She nudged Jamal, her whisper sharp, urgent. "Someone's there." He froze, his fists clenching, his gaze locking on the slit as a woman's face appeared, her eyes wide, her breath fogging the glass. It was Denise, a passenger from the dining car, her sleek blazer and sharp bob a stark contrast to the chaos around them. She'd sat silent during the wallet stunt, her phone tucked away, her expression unreadable. But now she pressed a finger to her lips, her voice a hushed thread. "I'm a lawyer. I saw everything. We're getting you out." Evelyn's chest loosened, a spark of hope cutting through the haze, her mind racing. A lawyer? Here? She'd thought the car had turned against her, but Denise had watched, waited, planned. Jamal lunged to the door, his voice low, fierce. "They've got me on video. Trent deleted it, but it's in the cloud. Can you get it?" Denise nodded, her eyes glinting with resolve, her hand slipping a pen through the slit, its tip scratched with her number. "Give me your login," she said, her tone all business, her fingers poised to write. Evelyn's hands shook, her sugar teetering, but she steadied herself, her cane tapping a rhythm as Jamal rattled off his credentials, his voice a lifeline. Denise scribbled fast, her blazer rustling as she ducked away, her heels clicking down the corridor, a ghost in the night. Evelyn sank back, her breath shallow, her vision swimming, but her mind sharpened, a plan forming. "She's our shot," she muttered, her words a vow. "We've got to move fast." The train rocked, its speed unrelenting, the holding car a prison swaying with every curve of the tracks. Evelyn fumbled in her pocket, her fingers brushing the last glucose tablet, its wrapper crinkling as she popped it into her mouth, the chalky sweetness a frail shield against the crash. Jamal crouched beside her, his eyes bright with defiance. "What's the play?" he asked, his tone urgent, protective. Evelyn swallowed hard, her throat dry, her voice a thread of steel. "She gets that video out. It's Trent's word against ours, but with proof, he's done." Jamal grinned, sly and sharp, his faith in her unshaken. "He'll choke on it," he said, his fist tapping the wall, a drumbeat of rebellion. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the train slicing through swamps and bayous, the night a blanket of ink outside. Then a faint buzz hummed through the car, Jamal's phone vibrating in the guard's lockbox beyond the door, a signal cutting through the silence. Evelyn's heart leapt, her hands clenching her cane, her ears straining as voices erupted in the dining car, a chaotic symphony of gasps and shouts. Denise had done it. The video hit the airwaves, uploaded to a news outlet mid-ride. Trent's smug face plastered across screens, his shove, his slurs, his lies laid bare. Passengers crowded the aisle, their phones glowing, their whispers turning to roars, a tidal wave of outrage crashing through the train. Evelyn's lips curled, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion, her triumph a flicker in the dark. The holding car door flew open, a guard bursting in, his vest sweat-stained, his face pale, his hands fumbling with keys. "Out!" he barked, his voice tight, his eyes darting to the chaos beyond. "Public's losing it. We've got to let you go." Jamal sprang up, his cuffs snapping free, his grin wide as he helped Evelyn to her feet, her cane a pillar under her trembling frame. She stepped into the corridor, her legs weak, her sugar teetering, but her head high, her eyes blazing. Passengers parted, their stares shifting from venom to awe, their phones still flashing, capturing her release. Trent stood at the dining car's edge, his wiry frame rigid, his pinched face flushed with fury, his smirk gone, his eyes burning holes into her. "This isn't over," he snarled, his voice a hiss, his hand twitching toward his radio. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady, unbroken. "Keep dreaming," she said, her words a blade, her triumph real this time. She sank into a seat, her breath ragged, her body screaming for rest, her mind buzzing with victory. The video had flipped the script, turned the car's hate into support, forced Trent's hand. She'd won, beaten him at his own game, and she'd lived to see Marcus graduate. Jamal sat beside her, his phone reclaimed, his fingers scrolling through the flood of comments, his laughter sharp, infectious. "They're calling him out everywhere," he said, his eyes bright, his youth a mirror to her resolve. Evelyn nodded, her cane tapping the floor, her chest swelling with a pride she hadn't felt in years. She'd face the shove, the frame-up, the cage, and come out standing. Trent was finished, his career a smoldering wreck, and she'd done it with grit and a kid's phone. But the train jolted hard, a violent shudder ripping through the car, the lights flickering, plunging them into shadow, then snapping back with a buzz. Passengers screamed, their phones dropping, their triumph turning to panic as the floor tilted, the wheels screeching against the tracks. Evelyn gripped the seat, her cane clattering, her heart pounding as the car rocked, a glass shattering, somewhere a child wailing in the distance. Jamal's eyes widened, his voice tight. "What the hell?" Evelyn's stomach twisted, her instincts flaring, her gaze darting to Trent, who'd vanished into the crew quarters, his shadow gone, his smirk a ghost in her mind. The train sped up, its rhythm erratic, its brakes whining, failing. She'd seen that grin before he'd slipped away, a flicker of malice, a promise of chaos. The dining car erupted, passengers scrambling, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of fear and confusion. Evelyn's head spun, her sugar crashing again, her vision blurring. But she forced herself to focus, her hands clawing the armrest. "He's done something," she rasped, her voice faint, her mind racing. "The brakes." He's hit back. Jamal lunged for the aisle, his phone flashing, his voice urgent. "We've got to stop this." Evelyn nodded, her cane a lifeline as she stood, her legs trembling, her resolve ironclad. She'd beaten him once, twice, 3 times, thought she'd won for good. But Trent wasn't folding. He'd sabotaged the train, turned her victory into a death trap, and now they were all in his crosshairs. The lights flickered again, the car tilting sharper, the screech of metal deafening as the train barreled toward disaster. Evelyn's breath caught, her body frail but her will unyielding, her eyes scanning for a way out. She'd stitched up chaos in ERs, raised Marcus through nights of terror, survived Trent's lies, his cage, his hate. This was a new beast, a mechanical monster he'd unleashed, but she wouldn't let it take her. Not now, not when she'd come so far. The crew quarters door swung open, a figure bolting through, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of Trent's uniform, his grin, his hands, empty but his intent clear. He'd locked the emergency exits, trapped them all, and she was the target, the spark he'd snuff out with a crash. "Hey folks, what's your take on this twist? Does Trent deserve to burn for this, or is he just a pawn in a bigger game?" Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Evelyn's counterattack was pure genius. Hit like if you're cheering her on through this madness, and subscribe to see how she fights back. Could she really outsmart a sabotage this deadly? Or is Trent's revenge about to derail everything? Stay tuned to find out. The train screamed through the Louisiana night, its wheels shrieking against the tracks, a runaway beast unleashed by Trent Baxter's vengeful hands. Evelyn Jackson clung to her seat in the dining car, her frail fingers digging into the vinyl, her cane wedged between her knees, its tip scraping the floor as the world tilted around her. The lights flickered wildly, casting jagged shadows across the passengers' panicked faces, their screams piercing the air as the car shuddered, plates and glasses crashing to the ground in a symphony of chaos. Jamal braced himself against the table, his young frame taut, his eyes wide with terror, his phone clutched tight, its screen glowing with the viral video that had sparked this nightmare. The train's speed surged, its brakes whining a futile protest, the steel frame groaning under the strain of Trent's sabotage. Evelyn's heart pounded, her sugar teetering on the edge, her vision blurring, but her mind snapped into focus, a nurse's calm, forged through decades of emergencies. "Brace yourselves," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din, her cane banging the table to jolt the stunned passengers into action. Mothers clutched children, businessmen ducked under seats. The teenage girl sobbed into her earbuds, her hands trembling. Jamal lunged for the aisle, his voice hoarse. "We've got to get to the exits." He darted toward the nearest door, Denise, the lawyer, scrambling after him, her blazer torn, her sharp bob askew, her eyes blazing with determination. They yanked at the handle, their fists pounding the steel, but it wouldn't budge, locked, tight by Trent's cruel design, trapping them all in his death spiral. The car rocked harder, a violent lurch sending a suitcase tumbling from the overhead rack, smashing into a table with a crack that split the wood. Evelyn's breath caught, her gaze darting to the crew quarters where Trent had slipped away, his wiry frame a ghost in the shadows, his grin a promise of ruin. She'd seen him vanish after the video went live, his fury a live wire sparking this chaos. And now she spotted him again, lurking near the galley, his hands fumbling with a panel, his smirk glinting in the flickering light. He'd rigged the brakes, locked the exits, and she knew why. Her victory had burned him, and he'd rather kill them all than let her win. Her eyes narrowed, her mind racing, her cane tapping a furious rhythm as she pieced it together. He'd planted evidence too, her cane's twin left near the controls, a twisted frame-up to pin this on her if they crashed. Jamal pounded the exit again, his fists bruising, his voice cracking. "It's stuck! He's locked us in!" Denise kicked the door, her heels snapping, her breath ragged. "There's got to be a manual override." Evelyn staggered to her feet, her legs trembling, her sugar crashing, but her will unyielding. She'd stitched up bleeders in blackout ERs, guided Marcus through nights of gunfire, beaten Trent's lies with a kid's phone. This was a train, a machine, and she'd find a way. "Radio," she rasped, pointing to the wall unit near the galley, its red light blinking through the haze. "Get help, now." Jamal nodded, darting through the chaos, passengers shoving past, their screams a wall of sound as he reached the radio, yanking the handset free. Static crackled, a hiss cutting through the noise, and Jamal's voice boomed, raw and desperate. "Mayday, this is the Atlanta to LA train. We're out of control. Brakes sabotaged, exits locked. Trent Baxter did this. He's framing Evelyn. Jackson, get us help." Evelyn stumbled closer, her cane a crutch, her voice joining his, steady despite the tremor in her chest. "He's got my cane up there, making it look like me. It's a lie. Stop this train." The car tilted sharper, a window cracking, glass splintering across the floor, passengers wailing as the speedometer climbed. The tracks a blur outside. Trent vanished again, his shadow melting into the crew quarters, his sabotage complete, his revenge a ticking bomb. A voice broke through the static, calm but urgent. An engineer from the control center miles away. "We've got your signal. Engaging remote override. Hang on." The train shuddered, a groan rippling through its steel bones, the speed easing, the brakes grinding back to life with a screech that shook the walls. Evelyn sank to her knees, her cane clattering, her breath ragged as the car leveled, the lights steadying, the chaos slowing to a stunned hush. Jamal grabbed her arm, his grip fierce, protective, hauling her up as passengers sobbed, their relief, a wave crashing over the wreckage. "We did it," he gasped, his grin shaky, his eyes bright. Evelyn nodded, her chest heaving, her sugar crashing harder, but her triumph real, raw, hers. She'd turned the tide, exposed Trent live, saved them all, or so she thought. The train slowed to a crawl, its wheels hissing against the tracks, the night outside a swampy void swallowing their near-death plunge. Passengers hugged, their phones flashing, capturing the aftermath, their voices overlapping in a frantic hum. Evelyn's head spun, her vision blurring, her hands trembling as she clutched the radio, its handset warm from her grip. She'd beaten him again, outsmarted his crash, his frame-up, her voice a weapon that had pierced the static and pulled them back from the brink. She'd get to Marcus, see his graduation, bury Trent's career in the rubble of this night. Her lips curled, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion, her cane a quiet promise against the floor. But the crew quarters door creaked open, a sliver of light spilling out, and Trent emerged, his wiry frame stiff, his pinched face pale, his eyes wild with a fury that hadn't died. He held a gun, its barrel glinting in the flickering light, his hand steady, his smirk gone, replaced by a snarl of pure hate. Passengers froze, their relief shattering, their screams rising anew as he stormed down the aisle, his boots thudding a death march, his gaze locked on Evelyn. "You think you've won?" he roared, his voice a jagged edge, his gun swinging toward her head. "You're done, old woman. This ends now." Evelyn's heart stopped, her breath catching, her sugar crashing into oblivion, but her eyes never left his, her will unbowed. Jamal lunged, his body a shield. But Trent shoved him aside, his elbow cracking against the kid's jaw, sending him sprawling across a table, glass crunching under him. Denise screamed, her hands flailing, but Trent's focus was singular. His, gun inches from Evelyn's forehead, his finger twitching on the trigger. "You humiliated me," he hissed, his breath hot, his eyes burning. "Video or not, you don't walk away from this." Evelyn's vision swam, her body frail, her sugar gone, but her voice held, a thread of steel cutting through the fear. "You're the one who's finished," she rasped, her words a defiance he couldn't break. "Everyone knows what you are." The car held its breath, the gun a cold promise, the train a tomb waiting to claim her. She'd rallied them, saved them, turned Trent's crash into a lifeline, thought she'd won the war. But he'd flipped it, turned her victory into a standoff, his gun a final blow she couldn't dodge. Her cane slipped, her hands shaking, her body failing, but her mind raced, searching for a way out. She'd faced death in ERs, stared down barrels in dark alleys, raised Marcus through nights of terror, and she wouldn't let this petty tyrant take her now. The train crept forward, its brakes holding, its passengers cowering, and Trent's gun loomed, a shadow over her triumph. She'd beaten him at every turn, thought she'd buried him, but he'd risen, a monster unleashed, and she was out of moves. The lights steadied, the car silent but for the hum of the engine, the tension a wire stretched to snapping. Evelyn's breath hitched, her sugar gone, her vision fading but her eyes burned, her defiance a flame he couldn't douse. She'd saved the train, exposed his sabotage, turned his frame up to ash, and she'd face this too, gun or not. Trent's finger tightened, his snarl a mask of rage, his revenge a bullet waiting to fly. She'd thought she'd won, thought she'd outlasted him, but he'd turned the tables, made her the target, and now the crash wasn't the threat. He was. The train rolled on, the night endless, and Evelyn sat there, frail but unyielding, her fight teetering on the edge of oblivion. The dining car trembled under the slowing train, its wheels hissing against the tracks, the Louisiana night a swampy void pressing against the cracked windows. Evelyn Jackson sat frozen, her frail frame dwarfed by Trent Baxter's looming shadow, his gun a cold steel promise inches from her forehead, its barrel glinting in the flickering light. Her hands shook, her sugar crashed, her vision a blur of dark spots, but her eyes burned into his, unyielding, a nurse's steel forged through decades of chaos. Jamal sprawled across a shattered table, his jaw bruised, his breath ragged, his attempt to shield her crushed by Trent's brutal shove. Denise cowered nearby, her blazer torn, her sharp bob tangled, her hands raised in a plea that went unheard. Passengers huddled, their screams choked into whimpers, their phones trembling as they filmed, the air thick with terror and the sour stench of spilled wine. Trent's wiry frame vibrated with rage, his pinched face twisted into a snarl, his pale eyes wild with a hate that had festered since her first defiance. "You think you're smart?" he roared, his voice a jagged blade slicing through the silence, his gun steady, his finger twitching. "That video, your little stunt, it's nothing. I'm teaching you a lesson you won't forget." Evelyn's chest heaved, her breath shallow, her sugar gone, but her voice held, a thread of defiance cutting through the haze. "Lessons over," she rasped, her words sharp, her cane slipping from her lap clattering to the floor. "You've lost. Everyone sees you now." Trent's snarl deepened, his free hand snatching her arm, yanking her from the seat, his grip a vice crushing her frail bones. She stumbled, her legs buckling, her vision swimming, but Trent dragged her down the aisle, his boots thudding a death march, his gun pressed to her temple, its metal cold against her skin. Passengers recoiled, their gasps a chorus of fear. The teenage girl sobbing into her hands, the businessman in the suit ducking behind a seat, his cowardice a stain on the air. Trent kicked open the engine room door, its steel frame slamming against the wall, the space a jungle of levers and gauges, the train's heart pulsing with a low hum. He shoved Evelyn inside, her hips slamming into a console, pain shooting through. Her breath catching as he locked the door, cutting them off from the car, from help, from hope. "No one's coming," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper, his gun swinging wild. "You're mine now." Evelyn slumped against the console, her hands trembling, her sugar crashing into oblivion, her body a frail shell screaming for insulin she didn't have. But her mind raced, a lifetime of outsmarting chaos kicking in, her eyes scanning the cramped room, its shadows hiding possibilities. Trent paced, his rants a torrent of hate, his words slurring into a racist flood. "You people always push. Always take, but not this time. I'm the one in charge, and you're gonna pay." Evelyn's jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She'd heard this before, in ERs from patients who'd rather die than let her touch them, on streets where cops saw her skin before her soul. She wouldn't break, not for him, not now. Her gaze landed on her cane, fallen near the door, its curved handle a weapon in waiting. She shifted, slow, deliberate, her dizziness a fog she pushed through, her voice a lure. "You're scared," she said, her tone steady, taunting. "That's why you're doing this. You're nothing without that gun." Trent wheeled on her, his eyes blazing, his gun swinging closer, his control slipping. "Scared?" he barked, his laugh a harsh crack. "I'll show you scared." He stepped forward, his boots scuffing the floor, his focus narrowing, and Evelyn saw her chance, her hand darting for the cane, her fingers brushing its wood as she swung it low, cracking it against his shin with a force born of desperation. Trent yelped, his leg buckling, his gun hand wavering, and Evelyn lunged, her body frail, but her will a hammer, knocking him off balance, his back slamming into the console with a thud that rattled the gauges. She grabbed his radio, its cord, dangling, her hand shaking as she mashed the button, her voice a shout cutting through the static. "Help! Engine room! Trent's got a gun! He's lost it!" Trent roared, his hand clawing for the gun, but Evelyn kicked it away, her foot weak but precise, the weapon skittering under a panel, out of reach. He lunged at her, his fists swinging, but she ducked, her cane a shield, her breath ragged as she screamed into the radio again. "He's trying to kill me! Get in here!" The door rattled, fists pounding from outside, Jamal's voice booming, raw and fierce. "Evelyn, hold on!" Trent scrambled for the gun, his hands clawing the floor, but the lock clicked, the door bursting open, two cops storming in, their vests tight, their guns drawn, their shouts a wall of sound. "Drop it, hands up!" Trent froze, his face paling, his hands rising slow, his snarl fading into a grimace as they cuffed him, his wrists snapping tight, his reign over. Evelyn collapsed, her sugar gone, her vision blackening, her cane clattering. As she hit the floor, her breath a faint wheeze. Jamal rushed to her, his hands lifting her, his voice a lifeline. "You're okay, you're okay," he gasped, his eyes wet, his grip fierce. The cops dragged Trent out, his boots scraping, his curses muffled as the dining car erupted in cheers, passengers crowding the aisle, their phones flashing, capturing his fall. Evelyn's head lolled, her body a wreck, but her triumph burned, a flame he couldn't douse. She'd outsmarted him, turned his hostage play into her victory, saved herself with a cane and a radio, thought she'd won the war. The train slowed to a stop, its brakes hissing. The next station a blur of lights and sirens, cops swarming the platform, their radios crackling with orders. Jamal cradled her, his voice steadying her, his phone reclaimed, its video a sword that had pierced Trent's armor. She'd beaten him, broken him, and she'd lived to see Marcus graduate, or so she believed. But the cops paused, their radios buzzing, a new voice cutting through, deep and authoritative, its tone chilling her bones. "Release him," it said, calm, final. "Chief's orders. Insufficient evidence." Evelyn's eyes fluttered open, her vision clearing just enough to see Trent's cuffs snap free, his wrists rubbing red, his smirk returning, slow and vicious. As he straightened, his gaze locking on her, the chief strode in, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming, his face a mirror of Trent's pinched features, his uncle's blood a shield she couldn't pierce. "Misunderstanding," he said, his voice smooth, his eyes cold. "He's free. You, though, you're coming with us." Evelyn's heart sank, her triumph crumbling, her breath catching as the chief's hand closed on her arm, his grip a new cage. She'd fought, won, turned Trent's gun into her victory, thought she'd buried him in the wreckage of his hate. But the system flipped it. His uncle's power a wall she couldn't climb, his release a slap across her face. Her sugar crashed harder, her body failing, her vision fading, but her mind screamed, clawing for a way out. She'd stitched up chaos, raised Marcus through hell, beaten Trent at every turn, and now this, a corrupt chief snatching her win away. The dining car hushed, passengers gaping, their cheers dying, their phones lowering as the chief dragged her up, her cane lost, her strength gone. Jamal lunged, his voice breaking. "You can't do this." But a cop shoved him back, his body hitting the wall, his fight snuffed out. The train sat still, its engine a low hum, the night outside a swamp swallowing her hope. Evelyn's head spun, her sugar gone, her body a shell, but her eyes burned, her defiance a ember he couldn't crush. She'd saved the train, exposed Trent's sabotage, turned his hostage play to ash, thought she'd won the day. But Trent smirked, free and vengeful, his uncle's badge a shield, his gun a threat he'd wield again. The chief's grip tightened, his voice a whisper in her ear. "You should have stayed quiet," he said, his tone a promise, his power a noose. Evelyn's breath hitched, her vision blackening, but her will held, a flame flickering in the dark. She'd beaten him once, twice, a dozen times, and she'd beat this too or die trying. The train sat motionless at a Louisiana station, its steel frame creaking in the humid night, the platform swarming with cops under flickering lights, their radios crackling with static that drowned out the swamp's chorus of crickets and frogs. Evelyn Jackson slumped in a makeshift holding area, a folding chair beneath her frail frame, her wrists aching from the chief's grip, her cane gone, lost in the engine room chaos. Her sugar had crashed, her vision a haze of shadows, her breath shallow as the last glucose tablet's effects faded into nothing. Jamal crouched nearby, his jaw bruised, his eyes red with fury, his hands flexing against the cuffs that still bound him despite Trent's release. The chief, Trent's uncle, strutted past, his uniform crisp, his badge a gleaming shield, his pinched face a mirror of his nephew's as he barked orders, his voice a whip cracking through the humid air. Trent lingered at the edge, his wiry frame free, his smirk back, sharper now, a blade honed by his uncle's power. Evelyn's chest heaved, her body a wreck, but her mind churned, a nurse's grit clawing through the fog. She'd beaten Trent's gun, turned his hostage play into her victory. Thought she'd won the night only for the chief to snatch it away. His corrupt hand a wall she couldn't breach. Now the station buzzed with a new threat, reporters swarming the platform, their cameras flashing, their mics thrusting toward Trent as he spun his tale. "She's a liar," he said, his voice smooth, rehearsed, his eyes glinting with malice. "A drug addict, faking her condition, stirring up trouble for attention. That video? Edited. She attacked me, stole a wallet, tried to crash the train. I'm the victim here." The chief nodded, his hand on Trent's shoulder, his tone grave. "We've got evidence. She's dangerous. Case closed." The words hit Evelyn like a fist, her breath catching, her sugar teetering as the lie spread, a poison seeping through the crowd. Passengers from the train nodded, their phones glowing, their whispers turning to shouts. The businessman in the suit muttering, "Knew she was bad news." The teenage girl texting furiously, her silence a betrayal now weaponized. Evelyn's head spun, her hands trembling, but her voice broke through, faint but fierce. "That's a lie," she rasped, her eyes locking on Trent. "You framed me. Everyone saw it." The chief wheeled on her, his face a mask of authority, his voice a snarl. "Quiet, or we'll add resisting to the list." Jamal lunged, his cuffs clanking, his voice raw. "You can't do this. We've got proof." But a cop shoved him back, his body hitting the chair, his fight muffled by the chief's power. The smear took flight, Trent and the chief feeding the press a torrent of filth, their words a storm drowning her truth. "Found pills in her bag," the chief lied, holding up a baggie of white tablets, their shape nothing like her insulin, his grin a quiet promise of ruin. "She's a junkie, a thief, a menace. Her grandson's no better, expelled from college for family misconduct. Evelyn's heart stopped, her breath gone, her vision blackening as Marcus's name hit her, a dagger twisting in her gut. Marcus, her boy, her pride, kicked out because of this. She'd raised him through gunfire and grief, worked nights to pay his tuition, and now Trent's lies had burned that too. She swayed, her body failing, but her will flared, a flame he couldn't snuff. The platform erupted, reporters shouting questions, cameras zooming, the story exploding across screens. As the night deepened, the swamp a silent witness to her disgrace. Evelyn's hands clenched, her nails digging into her palms, her mind racing for a way out. She'd beaten the crash, the gun, thought she'd won, only for this. A media blitz painting her as a monster, her name a slur on every tongue. But a flicker moved through the crowd. Denise, the lawyer, slipping past cops, her blazer torn, her eyes sharp, her phone clutched tight. She'd vanished after the engine room, and now she knelt beside Evelyn, her whisper urgent, a lifeline in the dark. "I've got contacts," she said, her voice low, fierce. "Local reporter, off the grid. Tell your story, now." Evelyn nodded, her breath shallow, her sugar gone, but her resolve ironclad. Denise dialed, her fingers flying, and a gruff voice answered, a small-time journalist named Ray, his tone skeptical but hungry. "This better be good," he growled, his recorder clicking on. Evelyn leaned in, her voice a thread of steel, her words cutting through the haze. "I'm Evelyn Jackson, 72, nurse, diabetic. Trent Baxter denied my meal, shoved me, framed me, tried to crash the train, held me at gunpoint, his uncles covering it, planting drugs, ruining my grandson. I've got video witnesses. It's the truth." Ray whistled, his tone shifting, eager. "That's gold. Stay alive, lady. I'm running it." The call ended, Denise's grin sly, her eyes bright with defiance as she slipped away, her phone, a weapon now loosed. Hours ticked by, the station a chaos of lights and lies. Evelyn's body fading, her sugar a ghost, but her hope flickering. A spark in the storm. Then the tide turned, Ray's story hitting the wires, raw and unfiltered, the video linked, unedited, Trent's face plastered across screens again, his shove, his gun, his hate undeniable. Passengers murmured, their phones buzzing, donations pouring in, a flood of cash for her defense, her name rising from the ashes. The chief's face paled, his badge a hollow shield, Trent's smirk faltering as the crowd shifted, their hate turning to doubt, their voices to cheers. Evelyn's chest swelled, her breath steadying, her triumph real, a wave crashing over the lies. She'd beaten the smear, turned their filth into her victory, thought she'd reclaimed her name, her grandson's future, her fight. The cops loosened, Jamal's cuffs, his grin breaking through, his fists unclenching as he hugged her, his youth a mirror to Marcus's. "You did it," he gasped, his eyes wet, his pride hers. She nodded, her hands trembling, her body frail, but her will a mountain. She'd faced the crash, the gun, the cage, and now this, a media war she'd won with a whisper and a phone. She'd get to LA, see Marcus graduate, bury Trent in the rubble of his hate, or so she believed. But the night shattered, a roar splitting the air, a fireball erupting in the distance, its orange glow painting the swamp red. Evelyn's heart stopped, her breath gone, her eyes locking on the chief as he barked orders, his radio crackling with panic. "Her house," he said, his voice a hiss, his grin a ghost. Atlanta's burning. Evelyn's world tilted, her sugar crashing, her vision blackening. Her home, her sanctuary, torched by Trent's mob, their lies a match to her life. She'd thought she'd won, thought the donations, the truth, had turned the tide, but they'd hit back, harder, crueler, a firebomb ripping her past to ash. Jamal's arms tightened, his voice breaking. "No, no, no," he gasped, his fight hers, her loss his. The platform hushed, reporters swarming the chief, their questions a storm, but his smirk held, his power a wall she couldn't climb. Evelyn's head spun, her body a shell, her sugar gone but her eyes burned, her defiance a flame he couldn't douse. She'd saved the train, beaten the gun, turned the smear to dust, thought she'd won the war. But Trent's mob had struck, his uncle's hand a shadow guiding the torch, her home a pile of cinders, her grandson's future a question mark. She'd survived ERs, raised Marcus through hell, faced Trent's hate at every turn, and now this, a fire that left her homeless, hunted, broken. The night stretched on, the swamp swallowing her hope, and Evelyn sat there, frail but unbowed, her fight teetering on the edge of ruin. Hey folks, what's your gut on this? Is Evelyn's comeback the stuff of legends? Or did Trent's firebomb cross a line too far? Drop a comment with number 1 if you're raging at this injustice, hit like if you're rooting for her to rise from the ashes, and subscribe to catch her next move. Can she rebuild from nothing? Or will Trent's hate bury her for good? Stay locked in to see where this blaze takes her. The Louisiana station faded into the swampy night, its lights a blur as Evelyn Jackson fled, her frail frame hunched in the back seat of a beat-up sedan, the engine rattling beneath her like a dying beast. Jamal gripped the wheel, his bruised jaw tight, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror, the road a ribbon of asphalt slicing through the bayou's tangled shadows. Denise sat shotgun, her blazer torn, her sharp bob matted with sweat, her phone glowing as she scrolled, her voice a low hum of plans and panic. Evelyn's hands trembled, her sugar a ghost, her cane lost to the chaos, her breath shallow as the news of her torched Atlanta home burned in her chest, a wound deeper than her body's frailty. The chief's smirk, Trent's freedom, the firebomb. They'd taken everything, turned her victory into ash, and now she was a fugitive hunted by a mob fueled by their lies. The sedan jolted over a pothole, its shocks groaning, the swamp's humid air seeping through cracked windows, thick with the scent of mud and decay. Evelyn's head spun, her vision blurring, her body screaming for insulin she didn't have, but her mind clawed through the haze, a nurse's grit refusing to break. She'd beaten the crash, the gun, the smear, thought she'd won, only for Trent's mob to strike, his uncle's hand guiding the torch that raised her life. "Where are we going?" she rasped, her voice faint, her hands clutching the seat, its vinyl sticky with age. Jamal glanced back, his eyes red, his tone fierce. "Motel, off the grid. Denise knows a spot." Denise nodded, her fingers tapping. The phone, her voice steady. 20 miles out, no cameras, no cops, we lay low, figure this out." The miles ticked by, the sedan weaving through back roads, its headlights cutting through the night, the swamp a silent witness to their flight. Evelyn's chest tightened, her breath catching, her sugar crashing harder, but her resolve held, a flame flickering in the dark. She'd raised Marcus through nights of gunfire, stitched up chaos in ERs, faced Trent's hate at every turn. And now this, a run from a mob she'd never provoked. Denise rummaged in her bag, pulling out a protein bar, its wrapper crinkling, as she pressed it into Evelyn's hands. "Eat," she said, her tone urgent, her eyes sharp. "It's not insulin, but it'll hold you." Evelyn tore into it, the dry oats crumbling on her tongue, her sugar inching back, her vision clearing just enough to see the road ahead, a lifeline in the void. They pulled into a rundown motel, its neon sign buzzing faintly, the lot a patchwork of gravel and weeds, the air heavy with the scent of gasoline and moss. Jamal killed the engine, his hands flexing, his voice low. "We're safe here for now." Evelyn stumbled out, her legs trembling, her body a shell, but her eyes scanned the shadows, her instincts flaring. The motel room was a cave of peeling, paint and musty carpet, its single bulb flickering as they locked the door, the night pressing against the grimy window. Denise flipped on a laptop, its screen glowing, her fingers flying as she dug into the chief's past, her voice a thread of steel. "He's got ties," she said, her eyes narrowing. "White supremacist group, old money, deep roots. This isn't just Trent, it's a network." Evelyn sank onto the bed, its springs creaking, her breath steadying, her mind racing as Denise's words sank in. A network? She'd thought it was Trent's ego, his uncle's badge, but this was bigger. A web of hate that had torched her home, expelled Marcus, hunted her now. She'd beaten them with a video, turned their smear to dust. Thought she'd won, only for this, a fugitive's life in a swamp motel. "We've got to fight back," she said, her voice faint but fierce, her hands clenching the mattress. Jamal nodded, his phone buzzing, his eyes bright. "Live stream," he said, his grin sly, sharp. "We tell the world, rally them, hit 'em where it hurts." Denise's fingers paused, her gaze locking on Evelyn's, her tone resolute. "I'll set it up. You talk, we broadcast." The room hummed with purpose, Jamal propping the phone, its camera blinking red as Denise patched it through a VPN, her skills a shield against their hunters. Evelyn straightened, her sugar teetering, her body frail, but her voice rose, a blade cutting through the night. "I'm Evelyn Jackson," she said, her words steady, her eyes blazing into the lens. "Trent Baxter and his uncle burned my home, framed me, hunted me. They're tied to hate, to power, and they won't stop, but I won't either. Help us." The stream exploded, viewers flooding in, their comments a roar of support, their donations piling up, a lifeline she'd wield like a weapon. She'd turned the tide, rallied allies, thought she'd won a shield against the mob, her name rising from the ashes again. The feds moved fast, their raid hitting the chief's office at dawn, a swarm of suits and badges storming the station, their radios crackling with warrants and shouts. The chief's ties unraveled, his supremacist links exposed, his cuffs snapping, tight as cameras flashed, his power crumbling under the livestream's weight. Evelyn watched from the motel, the TV flickering, her chest swelling, her triumph a wave crashing over the chaos. She'd beaten the fire, turned their hunt into her victory, thought she'd buried them, her grandson's future alight at the end. Jamal hugged her, his grin wide, his voice breaking. "They've got him," he gasped, his pride hers, his fight hers. Denise's eyes gleamed, her laptop buzzing, her tone sharp. "Chief's done. Trent's next." But the night shattered, a crash splitting the air, the motel door splintering as Trent burst in, his wiry frame a storm of rage, his gun glinting, his smirk a blade honed by hate. "You thought you'd win?" he roared, his voice a snarl, his boots crunching glass as he grabbed Jamal, yanking him from the bed, the kid's body slamming against the wall with a thud that shook the room. Evelyn lunged, her sugar gone, her vision blackening, but Trent's gun swung toward her, his hand a vice on Jamal's throat, his eyes wild. "Surrender," he hissed, his tone ice cold, final. "Or he dies." Denise screamed, her laptop tumbling, her hands flailing, but Trent's focus held, his gun a promise, his revenge a noose tightening around them all. Evelyn's heart stopped, her breath gone, her body failing as Jamal's gasps filled the room, his eyes pleading, his youth a mirror to Marcus's, her boy now lost to this war. She'd rallied the world, beaten the chief, thought she'd won, only for Trent to strike, his ambush a claw ripping her hope apart. "Let him go," she rasped, her voice faint, her hands trembling, her sugar crashing into oblivion. Trent laughed, a harsh grating sound that bounced off the peeling walls, his gun steady, his grip unrelenting. "You're done, old woman. Give up, or he's first." The motel shook, the swamp outside a silent witness, the night of void swallowing her triumph, her fight teetering on the edge of ruin. She'd turned the crash to victory, the gun to freedom, the smear to truth, thought she'd won the war with a live stream and a lawyer's grit. But Trent's ambush flipped it, turned her allies into prey, his gun a final blow she couldn't dodge. Her vision swam, her body a shell, but her mind raced, clawing for a way out. She'd stitched up chaos, raised Marcus through hell, faced Trent's hate at every turn. And now this, a kidnapping that tore her soul. The feds had the chief, but Trent was here, his mob a shadow she couldn't shake, his hate a fire that burned hotter than her home's ashes. The room spun, Jamal's gasps a drumbeat, and Evelyn stood, her legs trembling, her will a flame he couldn't douse, her fight a vow she'd keep or die by. The swamp hummed, the sedan a ghost outside, the motel a cage holding her last stand. Evelyn's breath hitched, her sugar gone, her vision fading, but her eyes locked on Trent, her defiance a spark in the dark. She'd saved the train. Beaten. The system turned the hunt to her favor, thought she'd won the day. But Trent's gun loomed, Jamal's life hung, and her triumph crumbled, a fugitive's dream torched by a man who'd never quit. She'd get him back, get to Marcus, or drag this whole rotten world down with her one way or another. The motel room reeked of mildew and broken glass, its walls trembling as the Louisiana swamp pressed in, a humid shroud swallowing the night. Evelyn Jackson stood frail but unbowed, her sugar a ghost, her vision a blur of shadows, her breath shallow as Trent Baxter's gun glinted in the dim light, its barrel a cold threat inches from her face. Jamal dangled in his grip, his young neck bruised, his gasps a desperate rhythm, his eyes pleading with a terror that mirrored Marcus's in her memory. Denise cowered by the shattered door, her blazer shredded, her sharp bob a tangle, her laptop a wreck on the floor, its screen dark. Trent's wiry frame vibrated with rage, his pinched face a mask of hate, his smirk a blade honed by every blow she'd landed against him. "Surrender," he snarled, his voice a hiss, his hand tightening on Jamal's throat. "Or he's dead, and you're next." Evelyn's chest heaved, her body failing, her sugar crashed, but her mind snapped into focus. A nurse's steel forged through decades of chaos. She'd beaten the crash, the smear, the fire. Thought she'd won with the live stream, only for Trent to rip Jamal from her, his gun a noose she couldn't slip. "Let him go," she rasped, her voice faint, her hands trembling, her legs barely holding her up. Trent laughed, a harsh, grating bark that rattled the peeling walls, his gun steady, his eyes wild. "You don't call shots, old woman. Trade yourself, or he's gone." Jamal kicked, his breath choking, his fight fading, and Evelyn's heart tore, her boy's face flashing in her mind, her resolve a flame he couldn't douse. She nodded slow, deliberate, her voice a thread of steel cutting through the haze. "Take me," she said, her eyes locking on his, her hands rising, palms out. A surrender that wasn't surrender. Trent's smirk widened, his grip loosening. On Jamal, his gun swinging toward her as he shoved the kid aside. Jamal's body hitting the floor with a thud, his gasps ragged but alive. Evelyn stumbled forward, her sugar gone, her vision blackening but her mind raced, her plan a spark in the dark. She'd slipped her phone into her pocket during the live stream, its camera rolling, its audio streaming to Denise's cloud, a secret weapon he didn't see. "Move!" Trent barked, his hand clamping her arm, dragging her out, his boots crunching glass, his gun a cold weight against her spine. The sedan roared to life outside, its engine a growl cutting through the swamp's hum, the night a void, swallowing their flight. Trent shoved her into the passenger seat, her body slumping, her breath shallow, her sugar crashing into oblivion as he peeled out, the motel shrinking in the rear view, Jamal and Denise a fading hope. The road twisted through cypress and mud, its curves a blur, the headlights slicing shadows as Trent ranted, his voice a torrent of hate. "You're finished," he hissed, his gun on his lap, his eyes darting to her. "Your little video, your allies gone. I'll bury you where no one finds you." Evelyn's head lolled, her body frail, but her voice held, a taunt he couldn't ignore. "You're confessing," she muttered, her words slurring, her phone a silent witness in her pocket. Trent wheeled into an abandoned warehouse, its walls rusted, its roof sagging, the swamp reclaiming it with vines and rot. He yanked her out, her legs buckling, her body hitting the dirt with a jolt that shot pain through her hip, her breath catching as he dragged her inside, his gun a constant threat, his smirk a promise of death. The space stank of oil and decay, its shadows deep, its silence a tomb waiting to claim her. He tied her wrists with rope, its fibers cutting her skin, his hands rough, his rants a flood of racist venom. "You thought you'd win," he snarled, his voice echoing off the steel. "You people always do, but not this time. I'll end you, your kid, your whole damn line." Evelyn's vision swam, her sugar gone, but her eyes burned, her phone humming. Its stream live, his confession a noose tightening around him. She slumped against a crate, her wrists raw, her body a shell, but her mind sharpened, her voice a lure. "You're scared," she rasped, her words faint, fierce. "That's why you're talking. You've lost everything." Trent's face flushed, his gun swinging wild, his control slipping as he roared, "Scared? I'll show you scared." He kicked her, his boot cracking her ribs, pain exploding through her, her breath gone, but she smiled, faint, defiant, her phone capturing every word, every blow, a live stream he didn't see, a trap he'd walked into. Sirens wailed in the distance, a faint howl cutting through the swamp, the feds closing in. Denise's call a beacon she'd lit before the ambush. The warehouse door crashed open, cops storming in, their vests tight, their guns drawn, their shouts a wall of sound. "Drop it," they barked, their lights blinding, their boots pounding as Trent spun, his gun rising, his snarl a mask of rage. Evelyn rolled, her body frail, her sugar crashed, but her will a hammer, her voice a shout cutting through the chaos. "He's confessing. It's live." Trent froze, his eyes widening, his gun wavering as the cops tackled him, his wrists snapping. Into cuffs, his body hitting the dirt with a thud that shook the crates. Jamal burst in, his face bruised, his eyes wet, his arms lifting her as she collapsed. Her sugar gone, her vision blackening, her triumph a wave crashing over the pain. The feds dragged Trent out, his boots scraping, his curses muffled. The warehouse, a chaos of lights and shouts, the live stream a sword that had pierced his heart. Evelyn's head lolled, her body a wreck but her chest swelled, her victory real, raw, hers. She'd traded herself, turned his ambush into her win, saved Jamal with a phone and a gamble, thought she'd buried Trent for good. Medics swarmed, their hands steadying her, an IV piercing her arm, sugar flooding her system, her vision clearing as the warehouse faded. The swamp a silent witness to her fight. Jamal clung to her, his voice breaking. "You're a badass," he gasped, his pride hers, his fight hers. The train station loomed again, its platform a blur of cops and cameras, Trent's cuffs tight, his smirk gone, his hate a cinder snuffed out. Evelyn sat on a stretcher, her breath steadying, her sugar rising, her triumph a light piercing the dark. She'd beaten the fire, the hunt, the gun, thought she'd won the war with a live stream and a rescue, her grandson's future a hope she'd reclaimed. But the governor's voice crackled through a radio, deep and cold, its tone chilling her bones. "Pardon him," it said, calm, final. "Public unrest demands it. Arrest her, inciting riots." Evelyn's heart sank, her victory crumbling, her breath catching as cops turned, their hands closing on her, their eyes blank, their badges a new cage. She'd saved Jamal, beaten Trent, turned his confession to ash, thought she'd won the day with a gambit and a stream. But the governor flipped it, his pardon a slap across her face, his order a noose she couldn't slip. Her sugar stabilized, her body steadied, but her world tilted, her triumph a mirage dissolving into a storm she couldn't fight. Jamal lunged, his voice breaking. "No, she's innocent!" But a cop shoved him back, his body hitting the stretcher, his fight snuffed out. The warehouse hushed, the feds gaping, their warrants useless as the governor's power loomed. His corruption, a wall she couldn't climb. Trent smirked, his cuffs snapping free, his freedom a taunt, his gun a threat he'd wield again. The night stretched on, the swamp swallowing her hope, the station a prison closing around her. Evelyn's head spun, her sugar holding, her vision clear, but her chest tightened, her defiance a flame he couldn't crush. She'd saved the train, beaten the system, turned the hunt to her favor, thought she'd won the war. But Trent's pardon flipped it, turned her rescue into a trap, his freedom a blow she couldn't dodge. She'd stitched up chaos, raised Marcus through hell, faced Trent's hate at every turn, and now this, a governor's order locking her away, her fight teetering on the edge of ruin. The cops dragged her up, her wrists raw, her strength fraying, but her eyes burned, her will, a vow she'd keep or die by. The Louisiana jail cell stank of bleach and rust, its concrete walls pressing in on Evelyn Jackson like a tomb, the air thick with the damp chill of the swamp night seeping through the bars. She sat on a hard bench, her frail frame hunched, her wrists raw from cuffs, her sugar stabilized by a medic's IV but her body a wreck, aching from Trent's boot and the governor's betrayal. The cell's dim bulb buzzed overhead, casting shadows across her lined face, her eyes burning with a fire that outshone her exhaustion. Jamal paced a neighboring cell, his bruised jaw tight, his fists clenching, his voice a low growl of fury, muffled by the steel bars. Denise sat shackled across the hall, her blazer gone, her sharp bob a mess, her laptop confiscated, her silence a storm waiting to break. The governor's pardon had freed Trent, his smirk a taunt as cops dragged Evelyn, here, his order branding her a rioter, a lie that buried her victory under a mountain of corruption. The jail hummed with tension, guards shuffling past, their boots echoing, their radios crackling with updates on the chaos outside, protests swelling in the streets, a tide of rage crashing against the system that had shielded Trent. Evelyn's chest heaved, her breath steady, her mind churning, a nurse's grit clawing through the haze. She'd beaten the crash, the gun, the fire, turned the hunt into her triumph with a live stream. Thought she'd won, only for the governor to flip it. His pardon a noose she couldn't slip, his arrest order a cage she couldn't break. The trial loomed, a sham stacked against her, its gavel a hammer waiting to fall, and Trent gloated in the courthouse lobby, his wiry frame free, his pinched face a mask of victory, his gun a threat he'd wield again. The cell door rattled, a guard shoving her toward a van, its engine growling, the night a blur as they sped to the courthouse, its steps swarming with reporters, their cameras flashing, their shouts a storm of questions she couldn't answer. Evelyn stumbled, her legs trembling, her cane gone, her body frail but her head high, her eyes blazing as they hauled her inside. The courtroom a cavern of polished wood and cold eyes, the judge a stern figure behind the bench, his robe a shroud of power. Trent sat in the gallery, his smirk sharp, his uniform crisp, his freedom a slap across her face. The prosecutor paced, his voice a blade, his lies a torrent painting her as a menace, a rioter, a thief, her video twisted into incitement, her fight a crime. She endangered lives, he barked, his hands waving, his evidence a pile of planted pills and forged reports, the chief's hand a ghost guiding every word. Evelyn's lawyer, a harried public defender named Lee, fumbled papers, his voice shaky, his defense a whisper against the storm. But her eyes burned, her will a flame he couldn't douse. She'd saved Jamal, beaten Trent's confession, turned the system's hate to ash, thought she'd won, only for this, a trial rigged to bury her. The judge's gavel cracked, his voice a drone, the charges piling up, theft, assault, rioting, each a brick in the wall closing around her. She stood, her legs trembling, her voice cutting through the din, faint but fierce. "It's lies," she rasped, her eyes locking on Trent. "He framed me, burned my home, hunted me. You've got the video, the truth." The judge's brow furrowed, his hand pausing, but the prosecutor smirked, his rebuttal a flood drowning her plea. The courthouse doors burst open, a roar spilling in, Jamal and Denise breaking free, their cuffs gone, their voices booming as protesters flooded the steps, their signs a forest of rage, their chants a tidal wave crashing through the walls. "Free. Evelyn, justice now!" they screamed, their phones flashing, their live streams a mirror to her fight, the governor's emails a bombshell clutched in Jamal's hands, leaked by a mole, their words a noose around the state's neck. Denise shoved through, her eyes sharp, her voice a blade. "Read these!" she shouted, thrusting the papers at Lee, her proof a lightning strike splitting the lie. The judge snatched them, his glasses glinting, his face paling as he scanned. The lines, the governor's racist rants, his orders to pardon, his ties to the chief, a web of hate laid bare. The courtroom erupted, reporters scrambling, their cameras zooming, the gallery gasping as Trent's smirk faltered, his hands twitching, his freedom teetering. Evelyn's chest swelled, her breath steadying, her triumph a spark igniting the chaos, her allies a storm she'd rallied from a motel bed. The judge banged his gavel, his voice a thunderclap, his eyes blazing. "Charges dismissed," he barked, his hand slamming the bench, his ruling a crack splitting the system's wall. "Baxter, you're under arrest. Conspiracy, assault, sabotage." Cops swarmed Trent, his wrists snapping into cuffs, his snarl a mask of rage as they dragged him out, his boots scraping, his hate a cinder snuffed out. Evelyn stood, her body frail, her sugar holding, her victory real, raw, hers, her cane a memory she didn't need as she raised her fist. a vow unbroken. The courthouse steps roared, protesters cheering, their voices a wave lifting her as cops unshackled her, their eyes averted, their badges tarnished by the truth. Jamal hugged her, his grin wide, his pride hers, Denise's hand on her shoulder, her fight hers, the live stream a sword that had pierced the governor's armor. She'd beaten the hunt, the ambush, the trial, thought she'd won the war, her grandson's future a light piercing the dark. She stepped into the night, the swamp air cool against her skin, her breath steady, her strength fraying but her will a mountain. Her name a rallying cry echoing through the crowd. She'd get to L.A., see Marcus graduate, bury Trent in the rubble of his hate, or so she believed. But a crack split the air, a sniper's bullet slicing the night, grazing her arm, its sting a fire ripping through her blood abloom on the steps as she stumbled, her breath catching, her vision blurring. The crowd screamed, their cheers, turning to panic, their phones flashing as Jamal caught her, his voice breaking. "No! Stay with me!" Denise spun, her eyes wild, her hands pressing the wound, her shout a plea lost in the chaos. Evelyn's head lolled, her sugar holding, her body failing, but her eyes burned, her defiance a flame he couldn't crush. She'd beaten the system, turned the trial to ash, thought she'd won the day. Only for this, a sniper's shot from the governor's secret cabal, a blow she couldn't dodge. The steps erupted, cops swarming, their radios crackling, their shouts a wall of sound as the shooter vanished into the swamp, his shadow a ghost she couldn't chase. Evelyn's chest tightened, her breath shallow, her blood pooling. But her mind raced, her will a vow she'd keep or die by. She'd saved the train, beaten the smear, turned the hunt to her favor, thought she'd won the war with a fist and a leak. But the cabal struck, their bullet a message, her freedom a lie bleeding out on the steps. Jamal's arms held her, his tears hot, his fight hers, Denise's hands a lifeline, her voice a thread in the storm. "You're not done," she gasped, her eyes sharp, her belief hers. The night swallowed the chaos, the swamp a silent witness, the courthouse a battlefield littered with her blood. Evelyn's vision swam, her sugar steady, her body frail, but her eyes locked on the stars, her defiance a spark in the dark. She'd faced Trent's hate, the chief's lies, the governor's power, beaten them at every turn, thought she'd won the day. But the sniper flipped it, turned her stand into a target, his bullet a blow she couldn't outrun. She'd stitched up chaos, raised Marcus through hell, survived a war she'd never asked for, and now this, a shot that left her broken, the war far from won. The crowd hushed, the medics swarming, their hands lifting her fight teetering on the edge of oblivion. The Los Angeles train station buzzed with chaos, its platform a sea of stunned faces as Evelyn Jackson crumpled to the ground, her frail frame sprawled across the concrete, her blood a stark bloom against the gray. Her arm throbbed from the snipers, graze her sugar teetering despite the medic's IV, her breath shallow as the crowd gasped, their phones flashing, their whispers a storm of shock and fear. Jamal knelt beside her, his bruised hands cradling her head, his voice breaking with panic. "Stay with me, Evelyn." Denise pressed the wound, her sharp bob matted with sweat, her eyes wild, her hands trembling but steady, a lawyer's grit, holding her together. The station's lights glared, the air thick with diesel and panic, the night a shroud swallowing the victory she'd clawed from the courthouse steps hours ago. Trent was cuffed again, the governor's pardon shattered, but this collapse, this blood, looked like defeat. A final blow from a cabal she couldn't outrun, her vision blurred, her body frail, her chest heaving as medics swarmed, their voices a hum of urgency, their hands lifting her onto a stretcher, its wheels rattling against the platform. The crowd parted, their faces a blur of awe and dread, the viral video of her trial triumph now eclipsed by this. Her lifeless sprawl a headline screaming across screens. She'd beaten the crash, the gun, the fire, turned the hunt into her stand, thought she'd won with the Fed's raid and the judge's gavel, only for the sniper to strike, his bullet a message from a shadow she couldn't name. Her eyes fluttered, her breath faint, but her mind sharpened, a nurse's steel cutting through the haze. This wasn't defeat. This was her play, a gambit she'd set with Jamal in the motel, a trap she'd baited with her own blood. The chaos paused, A hush rippling through the station as her eyes snapped open, her hand gripping Jamal's, her voice a whisper cutting through the din. "Now!" she rasped, her lips curling, her collapse a ruse, her fall a lure. Jamal grinned, sly and sharp, his phone buzzing in his pocket, its live stream rolling since the courthouse, a secret feed patched to the feds, its audio a net closing around the cabal. She'd faked it, her sugar crash a mask, her blood a prop from a medic. Ali, a plan whispered in the sedan's dark hours. A checkmate Trent and his masters couldn't see. The station erupted, feds storming in, their vests tight, their guns drawn, their shouts a wall of sound as they swarmed the platform, their radios crackling with warrants and names, the governor's among them, his shadow, a giant felled by her lie. Evelyn sat up, her arm bandaged, her sugar steady, her body frail but her will a mountain, her eyes blazing as the feds dragged Trent back, his wiry frame thrashing, his pinched face pale, his smirk gone, his cuffs snapping tight. The governor emerged from a black SUV, his suit crisp, his face a mask of calm shattered by panic as agents cuffed him, his racist emails a noose, his pardon a crime, his power dust in her hands. A new figure stepped from the shadows, a railroad tycoon named Hargrove, his silver hair glinting, his wealth a web that had spun this war, his voice a hiss of orders to silence black voices, his arrest a thunderclap splitting the night. Evelyn's chest swelled, her breath steady, her triumph a wave crashing over the chaos, her ruse a blade that had pierced the heart of their hate. The station hushed, the crowd gaping, their phones flashing as the feds hauled the trio away. Trent's curses a fading echo, the governor's pleas a whimper, Hargrove's silence a confession. Evelyn stood, Jamal's arm a pillar, Denise's grin a mirror to her own, her victory real, raw, hers, her collapse a lie that had lured them, out her blood a signal that had sprung the trap. She'd beaten the meal denial, the crash, the gun, turned the smear into truth, the hunt into justice, thought she'd won a dozen times, only for this, a final twist that flipped the war, her fake fall a checkmate they'd never foreseen. The medics stepped back, their ally revealed. A nurse named Lila who'd slipped her the IV, her nod a quiet pride in their scheme. Jamal hugged her, his voice breaking, his eyes wet with relief. "You're insane," he gasped, his grin wide, his youth a light she'd fought for. Denise clutched her hand, her tone fierce, her fight hers. "You played them all," she said, her eyes sharp, her belief a rock she'd built on. Evelyn's arm throbbed, her sugar holding, her body a shell, but her chest swelled, her defiance a flame they couldn't crush. She'd stitched up chaos in ERs, raised Marcus through hell, faced Trent's hate, the chief's lies, the governor's power, turned every blow into her win. And now this, a tycoon's fall, a cabal's ruin, her name a rallying cry echoing through the station. She'd get to Marcus's graduation, see his diploma, bury this war in the rubble of their hate, her fight a vow she'd kept. The feds swarmed, their radios buzzing, their voices a hum of victory as they uncovered Hargrove's files, his orders a trail of blood and bribes. His railroad empire a machine that had crushed voices like hers for decades. Trent's eyes met hers, his smirk gone, his regret a shadow too late. His life locked away as the governor's pleas faded, his power a memory, his hate a cinder snuffed out. Evelyn's breath steadied, her vision clearing, her strength fraying, but her will ironclad, her triumph a light piercing the dark. She'd turned the sniper's shot into her weapon, her collapse into her victory. Thought she'd lost a dozen times, only for this, a final stand that flipped the board, her ruse a spark that burned their world to ash. The station settled, the crowd thinning, their phones lowering as the night deepened, the swamp air cool against her skin, the stars a canopy over her win. Evelyn leaned on Jamal, his arm a lifeline, Denise's hand a steadying force, her fight a legacy they'd carry. She'd beaten the meal denial with a stand, the crash with a radio, the gun with a cane, turned the smear into truth, the fire into a rally, the hunt into a live stream, the trial into freedom. And now this, a collapse that wasn't defeat, but domination. A trap that had felled a tycoon who'd thought her weak. Her arm ached, her sugar teetered, but her chest swelled. Her victory a wave she'd ride to LA, to Marcus, to a future she'd forged through fire. The medics lingered. Lila's nod a quiet promise. Her role a secret they'd keep. Her pride a mirror to Evelyn's own. Jamal's phone buzzed, its stream ending. Its viewers a silent army she'd rallied. Their donations a lifeline she'd wheeled to rebuild. Denise's eyes gleamed, her voice a thread of steel. "They're done," she said, her grin sly, her fight hers. Evelyn nodded, her breath steady, her body frail but her will a mountain, her name a vow echoing through the night. She'd faced Trent's hate, the chief's corruption, the governor's power, Hargrove's empire, beaten them at every turn, turned every blow into her win, and now this, a final twist that left them broken, her triumph a flame that would burn on. The station faded, the train a distant hum, the swamp a silent witness to her war, her blood a mark on the platform, her collapse a lie that had won the day. Evelyn's vision steadied, her sugar holding, her chest tightening with a pride she'd earned, her fight a legacy she'd leave. She'd stitched up chaos, raised Marcus through hell, survived a war she'd never asked for, turned every loss into a stand, and now this, a ruse that flipped the world, her victory a light piercing the dark. The night stretched on, the stars, a promise, and Evelyn stood there, frail but unbowed, her war won, her vow kept, her fight a fire that would never die. Evelyn Jackson's journey in Flight Attendant refuses to provide meal to elderly black woman with diabetes, then she regrets it, is a raw testament to resilience against systemic injustice. Her fight teaches us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to push through it, even when the odds stack higher with every blow. From a denied meal to a sniper's bullet, Evelyn faced escalating racism head-on, proving that one voice, backed by grit and strategy, can topple empires of hate. Her story shows how systemic bias thrives in silence. Trent's smug denial, the chief's corruption, the governor's pardon, but crumbles when exposed by relentless truth. She didn't just survive, she turned every attack into a weapon. Her fake collapse a brilliant checkmate that felled a tycoon. The lesson here is clear. Standing up matters, even when it costs everything. Home, health, freedom. Evelyn's cunning, from live streams to allies, reminds us that justice demands more than anger. It needs smarts, patience, and a refusal to quit. Her triumph over Hargrove's cabal proves that power built on oppression is fragile when challenged by those it underestimates. For every Trent who smirks, there's an Evelyn who rises, showing that change starts with one defiant spark. Her legacy isn't just victory, it's a call to question, to fight, to never let hate win unchallenged. So, what's your takeaway? How far would you go to stand against wrong, even when the system's rigged? Drop a comment with your thoughts, hit like if Evelyn's fire inspires you, and subscribe for more tales of unbreakable spirits. Share this story if you believe one voice can shift the world. It's a spark worth spreading. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. Here's to strength in the face of storms and a future where justice isn't just a dream,